But by the early 20th century, a strong consensus had developed that even by the continent's increasingly prevalent, increasingly comprehensive standards of military planning and military posturing, Germany was in a class by itself. 1. That development was by no means irrational. At seventh and last, Germany had been united by force of arms. A century's dream had been fulfilled not by politicians or philosophers, intellectuals or industrialists, but by soldiers. Moreover, unification's price in lives and money had been cheap. Even during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–71, total deaths amounted to around 30,000. In contrast with the Crimea or the American Civil War, most had been recorded. Increasing numbers were listed on local public monuments. Unlike their Civil War and World War I counterparts, Germany's veterans developed nothing like a mythology of sacrifice and victimization. Instead, the war deaths had an opposite effect, providing groups and cohorts, whether university classes or soldiers' associations, with foci for a nostalgia that increased as time passed. Nor did unification have a high direct cost. If the South German states had their share of financial problems, Prussia had been able to underwrite victory in 1864 and 1866 by conventional means, the state treasury and the international finance market. Loans and public subscriptions carried the major burden of 1870–71, with the French indemnity coming in to balance the books. War seemed good business financially as well as psychologically. It made little difference that in fact the indemnity contributed heavily to the overheated economy and the speculative boom that in 1873 triggered 2 decades' worth of economic depression throughout Europe. Instead, the promoters' panic was projected as the work of liberals and Jews, or internalized as a punishment for seeking profit without working for it. Internationally, too, the wars of unification seemed an unadulterated triumph. A Prussia that for over a century had been a great power only by the courtesy of its neighbours, now stood at the apex of Europe, not a hegemon definitely, but a fulcrum with arguably more leverage to come. No longer were the Reich's lesser states clients to be bought, used and discarded, as in the days of Louis XIV and Napoleon. An army that in 1860 had been described as embarrassing the profession of arms now set global standards for doctrine, tactics, and even uniforms, as spiked helmets appeared on the parade grounds of the American West. Small wonder that Max Weber prized his status as a reserve officer alongside his position as Germany's foremost economist. The wars of unification made German geopolitically legitimate. Such once credible alternatives as the Confederation established at the Congress of Vienna, with its joint Austro-Russian hegemony, or the German-dominated Central European Confederation advocated during the 1850s by philosopher-politician Konstantin Franz, had neither support nor viability. In Austria, itself reconfigured in 1867, the end of the old order generated some nostalgia, but the outcome of the Franco-Prussian War was a clear sign that hopes of a Habsburg-dominated Greater Germany, centered north of the Inn River, no longer existed. The wars of unification had demonstrated to the lesser German states the advantage, arguably the necessity, of participation in a large-scale military and economic system, particularly since the federal organization of the Second Reich meant that local mores and local power structures were respected, if not privileged. Factionalism also posed no significant problems, immediate or long-term. Liberal and progressive elements felt themselves so well satisfied with the new imperial system that by most accounts they offered too little resistance to Bismarck's political manipulations during the 1870s. Of the Reich's ethnic minorities, the Poles had nowhere else to go, since no prospects for re-establishing Polish independence existed outside the context of cataclysmic war. The integration of Alsatians into the new state was more successful for a longer period than French nationalism has been willing to concede. Jews had participated in the war enthusiastically in every capacity, from riflemen to surgeons. Their behavior, while motivated primarily from conviction, reflected as well the hope that finally they would be recognized as fully equal citizens. They embraced the new Reich with an enthusiasm that denied an anti-Semitism, the influence of which up to 1914 was in any case limited enough to seem trivial in retrospect. Catholics made up a one-third religious minority in a state the dominant ethos of which was moving towards Protestantized secularism.